What happened to those working man's dinners that were made from sweat, thrift, and pride after a long day's work? Back then, dinner meant something real, something earned. When did we stop tasting that kind of honesty at the table? Peanut soup was a filling option that came straight out of the need for protein when meat was too expensive or unavailable. Ground peanuts simmered with water or milk created a creamy, nutty broth that was surprisingly hearty. Onions, celery, or a bit of leftover potato might be added to give it body, but the peanuts did most of the heavy lifting. The flavor was rich enough that it almost felt indulgent, even though it cost very little to prepare. Served with cornbread or biscuits if available, it could stretch into a complete meal for an entire family. Many households in the South relied on peanuts as a cheap crop, and this soup was a natural way to put them to use. For many children who grew up during the Depression, peanut soup became a nostalgic memory of warmth and survival, showing how simple ingredients could stand in for things they could not afford. Smoked picnic ham with brown sugar was another really inexpensive way to stretch ingredients without breaking the bank. You might not know, but refined sugar actually pretty much became a myth in homes back then. In more bougie neighborhoods, sure, you'd pop open a cabinet and see some sitting pretty, but for everyone else, that just wasn't the case. Refined sugar was a rarity and also an expensive ingredient to buy. Brown sugar, on the other hand, was the perfect fix. Cheap, available easily, and barely distinguishable, it was the backbone of a lot of wartime cooking. Also, the smoked picnic ham isn't really authentic either, at least not in the way you're thinking. Ham usually is made from the hind leg, but picnic ham is cured, and it's cut out of the shoulder. It's got mostly the same texture, but it's a bit on the cheaper side because it's tougher and has a higher fat percentage, which wasn't really a bad thing. I mean, the people were definitely lacking some of that in their diet. Smoked picnic hams with brown sugar were most regularly made around things like Thanksgiving and Christmas. It was a nifty little way to make everyone feel like they were celebrating. Real quick, if you're loving this content as much as we loved making it, hit subscribe to stay connected and help us reach even more amazing folks like you. Smoked picnic ham with brown sugar was another really inexpensive way to stretch ingredients without breaking the bank. You might not know, but refined sugar actually pretty much became a myth in homes back then. In more bougie neighborhoods, sure, you'd pop open a cabinet and see some sitting pretty, but for everyone else, that just wasn't the case. Refined sugar was a rarity and also an expensive ingredient to buy. Brown sugar, on the other hand, was the perfect fix. Cheap, available easily, and barely distinguishable, it was the backbone of a lot of wartime cooking. Also, the smoked picnic ham isn't really authentic either, at least not in the way you're thinking. Ham usually is made from the hind leg, but picnic ham is cured, and it's cut out of the shoulder. It's got mostly the same texture, but it's a bit on the cheaper side because it's tougher and has a higher fat percentage, which wasn't really a bad thing. I mean, the people were definitely lacking some of that in their diet. Smoked picnic hams with brown sugar were most regularly made around things like Thanksgiving and Christmas. It was a nifty little way to make everyone feel like they were celebrating. Real quick, if you're loving this content as much as we loved making it, hit subscribe to stay connected and help us reach even more amazing folks like you. Speaking of molasses, they also went really great with some slow-baked beans. Molasses have a knack for adding a lot of deep flavor to a dish, and the fact that these were usually left overnight to absorb all of it made for probably the best baked beans people could get in those times. It was especially popular as a summertime meal. Baked beans were not too hard to get, not the tinned versions because those were still pricey. Once you had some, you would just leave them in water to soften, and then the beans would be baked for 8 hours straight overnight. Making it was a whole day, literally. But once you were done with the prep work, it was all just a waiting game. And this was one time where being patient really paid off. If you ask someone to name one dish that describes diets during the Dust Bowl era, bean soup is the first meal that comes to mind. Beans have been man's best friend through some of the tensest times in history. They've been used in different kinds of meals through thick and thin. Bean soup was the classic bean dish of the 30s. Beans were cheap and easy to store, so they were a staple in many pantries. Bean soup could be made with any type of bean, and it was often thickened with cornmeal or bread. The simplicity of bean soup meant that it could be stretched to feed many people, and it provided a good source of protein and fiber. Bean soup might not have been the most exciting dish, but it was a staple of the Dust Bowl diet for a reason. It provided essential nutrition, was easy to make, and offered a bit of comfort and warmth. It was a reliable and nurturing meal that helped families get through some of the toughest times. Liverwurst sandwiches were bold. You knew at the moment someone unwrapped one across the table. That unmistakable scent, rich and meaty, mixed with sharp mustard or sliced onions, hit like a wave. The sandwich itself was unapologetically old school, usually served on rye or pumpernickel bread, often from a family who still shopped at the neighborhood butcher. Liverwurst was spreadable sausage, soft but full of iron and flavor, and it had no intention of going unnoticed. It was the sandwich your grandpa swore by, the one your parents either embraced or exiled. And for kids, it was a gamble, either a lunchroom legend or a quick trade for something with peanut butter. But for those who loved it, liverwurst was gold. It was hearty. It was grown up. It was tradition sliced thick and pressed between slices of something dark and sturdy. Liverwurst never begged for your approval. It knew it was not for everyone. Today, you hardly see it outside specialty stores and deli counters. But for a time, it was part of the rotation. Loved by few, remembered by all. The egg salad sandwich is creamy, comforting, and unmistakably retro. Made from chopped hard-boiled eggs mixed with mayonnaise, mustard, maybe a dash of paprika or chopped celery, it's been a lunchtime standby for decades. Spread thickly onto white or wheat bread, it's soft enough to squish between your fingers but rich enough to feel like a meal. Grandmas packed them for road trips, office workers brought them in wax paper, and diners offered them as a cooling option on hot days. It wasn't fancy, but it was familiar, a quiet kind of indulgence. Every family had their own version, some chunkier, some smoother, some with green olives or scallions, others strictly plain. There's something nostalgic about the way it smells when you unwrap it, and the way the bread sticks just a little to the roof of your mouth. The egg salad sandwich never tried to compete with cold cuts. It just showed up, creamy and loyal, ready to carry you through till dinner. Milk toast was one of the humblest but most beloved comfort foods of the Depression. Families would toast slices of bread, often stale or homemade, and soak them in warm milk flavored with sugar or a pinch of salt. The softened bread took on a custard-like texture that children especially enjoyed, while adults valued its warmth and simplicity. Milk toast was often served for breakfast or supper when cupboards were bare, providing a soothing, filling option that used ingredients most homes had on hand. It was easy to digest, which also made it a common food for the elderly and the sick. In households where milk was scarce, families watered it down, making it stretch further while still preserving the spirit of the dish. Milk toast was never glamorous, but it carried the weight of familiarity and comfort, reminding people that even the plainest foods could feel nurturing. It is remembered today not for extravagance, but for the quiet reassurance it gave in the hardest times. Rolled flank steak was a much less expensive cut of beef. A lot of protein like fish and canned ham were used, but people couldn't really replace the need for beef. Of course, they had to make do. But that meant another thing. Less popular cuts of meat, ones that people normally wouldn't give a second glance to, became a lot more in demand. Naturally, you'd think that would mean they'd raise the prices, right? Not really, because then people would just buy the beef. Flank steak in particular was tougher and a lot more rubbery, but it was also really tender when you would slow cook it. It also helped matters that most home chefs knew their way pretty intimately around slow cooking. Next, you'd do whatever you could to make sure that the beef would last as long as possible. It was usually common to serve rolled flank steak with stuffing to make a pretty neat dish that required minimal beef. The stuffing itself was made from economy loaves, vegetables, and different kinds of herbs. An otherwise small and pretty hard-to-chew piece of meat would become a meal the whole family could look forward to, if you were willing to invest the hours it would take to make something of it. Most people were just happy to eat beef, though, which made the prep work just a bit more bearable. Who doesn't love the aroma of a good homemade casserole? Well, this hearty meal was still winning hearts even during the Dust Bowl days. Now, during the Dust Bowl, casseroles weren't the fancy, cheesy concoctions we know today. They were more like a hodgepodge of whatever was on hand. Leftover vegetables, some mystery meat, maybe some canned beans, all thrown together in a baking dish. Not exactly Instagram-worthy, but it was a way to use up scraps and fill up the dining table. Plus, they were the stars of potlucks and holiday dinners. This was the era of coming up with all different recipes for casseroles and everything from hash brown casseroles to tuna noodle casseroles. These recipes were passed down from generation to generation and made their way to us. Casseroles were the kind of dish that brought people together, not just because they were filling, but because they were often made with love and shared with family and friends. They were a reminder that even in the hardest of times, people found ways to come together and enjoy a meal. Bread pudding has been a subject of much discussion in the history books of our developments with food. It would be a bit of an undersell to call it polarizing, since some people claim it is the ultimate comfort food, and there simply is not anything like it. Others think it is an affront to the concept of bread and pudding simultaneously, and fails to really capture the benefits of either. Still, the makeshift recipes from the 1930s were worth trying then, and are still worth trying now, as they put bread pudding on the map and helped it stay there. It was a great way to repurpose leftover stale bread, and despite its record as the poor man's pudding, it was a common recipe in church cookbooks even before the recession hit. All you had to do was get some boiling water, sugar, spices, and bread, and sure, it was not the most appealing or appetizing lump of dough to eat, but it got you through the day, and in times of extreme scarcity, who could ask for more? What's for dinner? Oh, just a small something that came in from the backyard. Yes, the tumbleweed casserole was a real dish during the Dust Bowl, which just goes to show you that when the going gets tough, the tough make casseroles out of tumbleweeds. Tumbleweeds, those rolling shrubs of the Wild West screen, are actually technically, or at least partially, edible. Not fancy for the tongue, but we are hungry to the bone. Let's give it a try, edible. The process began with the boiling of the tumbleweed leaves to reduce their coarse feel and also to reduce the bitterness of the leaves. Then they'd get layered with whatever ingredients were available, maybe some scraps of meat, potatoes, or canned goods if you were lucky. The result? A surprisingly substantial, earthy-flavored casserole that was as much about sustenance as it was about taste. Tumbleweed is very fibrous and even has a few vitamins in it, so it wasn't the worst thing to eat when fresh greens were scarce. Moreover, tumbleweeds were free and easy to come by, nature's grocery store if you will. Though you'll never see it on the dinner table. Tumbleweed casserole represents Dust Bowl endurance. Would I eat it? Well, I'd need a serious pep talk and a lot of seasoning. But hey, if the tumbleweed can take the hot winds, then it should not be a problem on my plate. The cheese and pickle sandwich is one of those odd combinations that divides people at the very first bite. On one side of the bread, you've got sharp cheddar or American cheese. On the other, sliced dill pickles or even sweet bread and butter chips. It's a collision of creamy and tangy, savory and sour. Some folks butter the bread, some toast it, others eat it plain and cold, but the core idea remains the same. It's a sandwich that feels retro in the best way, like something you'd find packed in wax paper alongside a thermos of milk. It's humble but bold, weird but strangely addictive. Born from the era of rationing and refrigerator scrounging, it was perfect for meatless lunches or quick snacks when the deli drawer was bare, and somehow it always worked, especially if the cheese was sharp enough to bite back. Today, it lives on in lunchboxes, late-night cravings, and memories of brown bag field trips. It might not be everyone's favorite, but for those who get it, there's nothing else quite like it. Fried bologna sandwiches were the working-class answer to gourmet, cheap, greasy, and absolutely perfect. A slice of bologna slapped into a hot skillet until it curled at the edges, sometimes scored in the center to keep it flat, then dropped onto bread and finished with mustard, cheese, or whatever was around. It sizzled, it popped, it smelled like something you were not supposed to enjoy this much, and kids loved it. The edges got crisp, The center stayed soft. It was the kind of sandwich that left a grease spot on the bag and a smile on your face. Fried bologna was not subtle, but it was reliable. It was warm and familiar. It made lunch feel like breakfast and dinner all at once. Parents made them quickly, often with one hand on the stove and the other helping with homework. It was the sandwich of multitaskers, of big families and thin budgets. And yet it tasted rich. It felt like a treat. Today you barely see them unless you go looking. But for those who grew up on it, fried bologna was not just food. It was a full sensory memory wrapped in white bread. Rice croquettes were a depression trick for turning yesterday's leftovers into something new and appetizing. When rice was cooked in large batches, families often had more than they could finish, and waste was simply not an option. Leftover rice was mashed together with a bit of flour or egg when available, then shaped into small balls and fried in a skillet with fat or drippings. The result was a golden, crispy outside and a soft, chewy inside that children especially loved. Adults appreciated how croquettes added texture and flavor to meals that were otherwise bland. They could be served with gravy, broth, or just eaten plain, offering flexibility depending on what was on hand. In some households, croquettes became the centerpiece of dinner when no meat was available. They proved that resourcefulness in the kitchen could transform scraps into something enjoyable. Families remembered rice croquettes not just as a thrifty dish, but as a rare moment when leftovers felt special instead of repetitive. They were simple, but in hard times, simplicity was often the best comfort of all. Potato cakes were pretty much the go-to option for almost everyone during the war period. You have to keep in mind that the country was still juggling the effects of the Great Depression too. Both of them in tandem really made it hard for people to get much else. As good as potatoes can be, especially when you serve them up in cake form, it can get a little stale. When you eat it as much as they did, it gets pretty hard to be excited for it. One way to really spice them up was to pair your potato cakes with fried onions. Sounds simple, but that's pretty much what sums up wartime cooking. Simple, efficient little tricks that make a world of difference. Potatoes were already a wartime staple. They were the easiest crop to grow around, and both rural farmers and government bigwigs took notice of that. This was a simple and amazing way to get some easy comfort and keep bellies full. Also, another thing that made these really easy was how much people traded potatoes and onions. It was really common to barter with vegetables. That meant that the recipe got around. It was in community cookbooks too, so there was no shortage of positive PR for it. I guess you could say it's pretty deserved, wouldn't you say? Imagine a world without fancy desserts or indulgent snacks. Well, that pretty much sums up the Dust Bowl era for you. Enter milk toast, which was one of the only sweet treats offered in the 30s. Milk toast was a breakfast dish consisting of toasted bread and warm milk, typically with sugar and butter. Some fancier variations included salt, pepper, paprika, cinnamon, cocoa, and raisins. Milk toast was a popular food throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, especially for young children. Now, this was the first choice for those feeling under the weather back in the day. Yeah, it was the classic sick people food of the Dust Bowl era. Often served with a pat of butter or a sprinkle of sugar, milk toast was a gentle food that was easy on the stomach. In Texas as well as New York, rice with raisins started becoming a really popular dish among the middle class and a breakfast that many children grew up on. Especially in Indian American communities, which were sparse at the time, but they were still there every other block or two. It was already customary to eat rice with milk and raisins there, so they brought it to America, and others took note. They were not the only ones to introduce it, though, since Chinese Americans also had their own take on the recipe that led to a more custard-like variant. When people could not afford to even eat rice pudding, they would make their rice and eat it with different kinds of nuts and raisins. The idea spread like wildfire in states like Alabama and Arkansas and the Midwest overall. In Michigan, it was a pretty common choice to use brown sugar and cinnamon whenever available. If you are considering giving up Starbucks as a hardship, just try making your coffee out of these plants. Dandelion coffee came into existence during the Dust Bowl when people could not afford coffee beans and other products. That's right, those yellow flowers that appear on your lawn in spring and are so annoying once provided the means to satisfy caffeine cravings at the survival level. For it, people would uproot dandelions, bake the roots until they were black and toasty, and then pulverize them into a brew. There was no sugar or cream, just the natural taste of roasted roots. It was not as strong as real coffee, but it provided people with something warm to drink in the mornings when they were unsure about the future. Moreover, dandelions were free and easily available, no need to go to Starbucks. To the chagrin of dandelion coffee, it is now considered a health drink. Rich in antioxidants, it is believed to have liver benefits and can be found at health food stores for a hefty price. It was not about the latest fad diet or the newest way to live a healthier lifestyle. It was about not going insane without your cup of coffee in the morning. I can't help but wonder how the farmers of Dust Bowl must have been feeling sipping on this dandelion brew and hoping for a better tomorrow and a decent cup of coffee. Now it is a retro chic beverage, while back then, dandelion coffee was a means of getting back to the normal, even if the normal tasted like the grass one mows. The manwich sandwich is what happens when you need dinner in 10 minutes and your pantry has exactly 2 ingredients, a can of manwich sauce and a pound of ground beef. It's the store-bought shortcut to a sloppy Joe, soaked in sweet, tangy tomato sauce and ready to heap on a hamburger bun. No chopping, no spice rack, no slow simmer, just brown the beef, pour the can, and you're done. In the 70s and 80s, it became a weeknight hero, advertised as, "A sandwich is a sandwich, but a manwich is a meal." It was a dinner-time fix for busy parents, latchkey kids, and anyone with a microwave and a spoon. The smell alone could draw kids out of their bedrooms like moths to a flame. Some added cheese, others pickles or onions, but most just kept it simple. It wasn't glamorous, but it got the job done. Today it still holds a place in the hearts of those who remember TV trays, linoleum kitchens, and the clink of a can opener on a Tuesday night. Cucumber sandwiches were delicate little reminders that even the school lunch table had room for refinement. Slices of cucumber, thin, chilled, often peeled, rested on buttered bread, sometimes layered with cream cheese or a dash of dill. The bread was soft, sometimes crustless, sometimes rye. It was like a tea party had wandered into the cafeteria. Cucumber sandwiches were quiet, crisp and cooling, refreshing in a world of meat and mustard. They did not make a mess. They did not leave a smell. But they stood out, precisely because they did not try to. These sandwiches were usually packed by someone who believed in manners, napkins, and balance. They were for the kid with the neat lunchbox, the thermos that never leaked, and the sandwiches that never squished. But they were not boring. Today, they are mostly seen at brunches or fancy luncheons. But back then, they were a gentle rebellion against the chaos of the cafeteria tray. Tomato sandwiches were summer captured between slices of white bread, simple and sublime. Nothing more than fresh, juicy tomato slices, a generous smear of mayonnaise, and a sprinkle of salt and pepper. That was it. But somehow, it was everything. The bread soaked up the juice until it was just on the edge of falling apart. The mayo added richness. The salt made the tomato sing. And when you bit into it, it felt like sunshine. These sandwiches were often packed right after a backyard harvest or a trip to the local farmer's stand. They were the definition of seasonal eating. No heating, no meat, just freshness layered onto something soft and humble. Kids either loved the tomato sandwich or hated it. There was no in between. But for those who did love it, nothing else would do. The sandwich tasted like summer break, like porch swings and cicadas, like sitting in class and counting down the days until school let out. Tomato sandwiches came and went with the season, and when they left, you missed them. You remembered how something so simple could somehow be so full. Mock fish cakes were a thrifty invention for families who longed for seafood but could not afford it during the Depression. Instead of fish, mashed beans or leftover potatoes were seasoned with onions and herbs, then shaped into patties and fried. When browned in a pan, they resembled fish cakes in both texture and appearance, providing the illusion of a more expensive meal. Families often relied on beans because they were cheap nutritious, and available through relief programs, making them the perfect base for this dish. Some households even added breadcrumbs or stale crackers to stretch the mixture further. While it might not have carried the same flavor as real fish, it was filling and hearty, which mattered most in those years. For many children, mock fish cakes became a familiar supper, remembered later with a mix of humor and nostalgia. They embodied the era's spirit of improvisation, turning simple, humble ingredients into something that felt like a substitute for luxury. A pretty imaginative way of getting some familiar old flavors back into the weekly diet was mock food, specifically mock fish fillets. We're going to take a look this time at both this recipe and how exactly things like it became common. See, there's one thing about people from back then. While they definitely had it horrible, their circumstances really expanded their horizons in the kitchen. Mock culture was all about mimicking flavors of classic dishes with inexpensive ingredients. Stuff that was easy to get, wouldn't cut too deep into your pockets, and would also last you a good while. Mock fish fillets were actually made out of mashed potatoes. I really wasn't kidding when I said people really grew a newfound appreciation for potatoes. Recipes in cookbooks back then were using them in ways that the curly fries and hash brown-addled brains of you and I could only dream of. Still, there were times when even potatoes weren't available. In that case, they'd make use of bread. Now, you might naturally be wondering how bread even comes close to imitating the flavor of a fish fillet. Well, apparently, soaking it in some milk and mixing it with powdered eggs and flour actually forms a mixture that gets the texture down. Next, your spices: onion, parsley, pepper, and some pretty basic stuff, which was still easy enough to get. Though even those were stretched thin, spice cabinets would often run empty. Do you think this actually does the job? If you try it, share what you thought in the comments below. Now, if you think baking a cake without eggs, milk, or butter sounds impossible, think again. During the Dust Bowl, people got creative with their baking. This egg-free, milk-free, and butter-free cake was made with simple ingredients like flour, sugar, and vegetable oil. It was impossible to live without cake even in times of desperation, so people decided to make do without the fancy ingredients. Now, I know eggs, milk, and butter don't sound fancy to us, but these ingredients were a luxury to find during the Dust Bowl days, and even if you did find some, it was never enough to whip up a whole cake. The cake might not have been as rich as its traditional counterparts, but it was a sweet treat that offered a bit of comfort during difficult times. In Texas, as well as New York, rice with raisins started becoming a really popular dish among the middle class and a breakfast that many children grew up on. Especially in Indian American communities, which were sparse at the time, but they were still there every other block or two. It was already customary to eat rice with milk and raisins there, so they brought it to America, and others took note. They were not the only ones to introduce it, though, since Chinese Americans also had their own take on the recipe that led to a more custard-like variant. When people could not afford to even eat rice pudding, they would make their rice and eat it with different kinds of nuts and raisins. If you always believed that only the drippings can be used to make gravy, then you are wrong. Blood gravy was a Dust Bowl staple that created a meal from the most unappetizing of ingredients: animal blood. Sound intense? It was. But back then, farmers couldn't afford to waste a single drop, literally. Blood gravy was produced by drawing fresh blood from animals, particularly pigs or cows, and then mixing it with flour, milk, and spices to make it into a thick paste that was served as a relish. Served over biscuits or potatoes, it was rather tasty and rich in nutrients, which came as a complete shock. During a period when people suffered from a lack of iron, blood gravy was, in fact, a sort of multivitamin. This dish was both a product of ingenuity and the expenditure of a considerable amount of effort. Getting the blood was not easy, but the meal was filling. For today's food lovers, it may be hard to swallow, but blood-based recipes are not something new to the culinary world, since there is blood pudding from Sweden and dinuguan from the Philippines. Would you try it? Seriously, I can take it if it's presented on a fluffy biscuit, and if it's well seasoned, I might be willing to try it. Dust Bowl cooks were masters of turning nothing into something, and blood gravy is a perfect example of that adage. Chicken salad sandwiches were the quiet heroes of the lunchroom, the kind of sandwich that looked unassuming but delivered comfort in every bite. They started with leftover chicken, chopped fine or shredded, then folded into mayonnaise with bits of celery, sometimes a hint of onion, maybe a touch of mustard or dill. It all depended on who made it. Every family had their version. Some were creamy, some were chunky, some were elegant enough for tea parties and school lunch alike. Slapped between slices of white wheat or a buttered roll, chicken salad was never flashy, but it never disappointed. It felt like home, like Sundays turned into Mondays. It was cold, clean, and quietly satisfying. Kids who got a chicken salad sandwich in their lunchbox were either praised or pitied, depending on who you asked, but they always remembered it. Today, chicken salad has migrated to cafe menus and plastic deli containers, far from its humble homemade origins. The hot brown was what you made when you had leftovers and a little bit of pride. Open-faced, built on a thick slice of toast, then loaded with turkey and bacon. But what made it special was the Mornay sauce, a rich, cheesy bechamel poured over the top and broiled until it bubbled and browned. It came out of Louisville, Kentucky from the Brown Hotel, but it made its way to family tables when there was turkey to use up and dads wanted something more than a cold sandwich. It was warm. It was indulgent. And it felt like dinner, even if it was built from scraps. Some versions added tomato slices, some skipped the broiler. But the essence stayed. Meat, cheese, bread, and heat. Working men who came home hungry could make one in 10 minutes. It was not pretty. It did not stack well. But it hit the spot and filled the plate. Sometimes that was all you asked of a meal. Molasses water was one of the simplest Depression-era energy boosters, and it carried a surprising amount of cultural weight. White sugar was often scarce and costly, but molasses was cheaper and packed with minerals like iron, which people desperately needed. Families would stir a spoonful of molasses into a glass of water, creating a sweet, dark drink that was both energizing and inexpensive. Children drank it before heading to school, and workers often relied on it to get through long hours of labor. It tasted strong, sometimes too strong for delicate palates, but its sweetness made it more welcome than plain water. Molasses water was also used as a quick fix when other drinks like milk or coffee were out of reach. For many rural families, it became a symbol of thrift and nourishment, stretching the value of every ingredient. It was not a luxury or even a treat. It was a necessity, one that reminded people of the importance of resourcefulness. In its simplicity, molasses water reflects how people created sustenance out of almost nothing and carried on despite hardship. I'm going to have to go back to talking about how much we've borrowed from our British friends over in the United Kingdom. Bubble and squeak is quintessential British food after all. It was pretty genius too. This shares a theme with the picnic casseroles we just discussed because both were phenomenal ways to repurpose your leftovers. A lot of these dishes were powerhouses made exclusively out of stuff that was either left behind or simply was about to go bad. The earliest mention of bubble and squeak is in the 1700s, and that's just a pretty bare-bones meat and cabbage dish. Over time, it was adapted to the current situation, and meatless versions were made popular. These ones just prioritized using potatoes and vegetables, basically anything high in fiber. The reason you'd want that is because it'd keep you full for longer, which was always a godsend during the war. The potatoes would work as a binding agent. The leftover vegetables were chopped and mixed in for nutrition, and if you got super lucky, some corned beef or bacon would work really well for flavor. As far as the culture goes, bubble and squeak really emphasize the mentality of wasting absolutely nothing. Despite how humble the recipe is, it's definitely something that brought comfort to a lot of families. War or no war, who can say some mashed potatoes and greens haven't cheered them up at some point? Now, bacon grease might seem like a strange thing to highlight, but hear me out. In a time when oil was scarce, bacon grease was like liquid gold. It was used for everything from frying potatoes to greasing pans. And let's be honest, it adds a flavor boost to just about anything. Can you imagine making biscuits with bacon grease? Oh, it was good. Bacon was one of the few adorable meats during this time, and it left behind grease, which was way too good to just toss out. Now, I know this bad boy has no nutritional value, but sometimes all you need is a little flavor in your life, and it's fine to have cheat days sometimes, right? So, While it might not be the healthiest option, it certainly helped to make those Dust Bowl meals a little more enjoyable. Mildred Armstrong Kalish lived in Iowa during the Great Depression. She recalls cooking with bacon grease, which she called her family's Tuscan olive oil. So, potatoes had more use than just what was under all the layers. Once peeled, people would often fry the potato skins as a midday snack. Nothing would ever go to waste in homes back then, as you must have gathered by now. If they can make stuff out of sausage drippings and drain the fat from bacon to reuse, frying up some potato skins does not seem that out of the box at all. These fried skins were the perfect sidekick to potato pancakes, and the fact that the skins had a lot of health benefits made it all the more appealing. Things like this really helped to keep appetites in check, and that meant that the financial situation of the home would be calmer too. When the cupboard was empty and the garden was dust, you made rag soup. Well, they did not boil actual rags, praise heavens, but because this soup was made from the scraps so lowly that it was like throwing rags into a pot. Rag soup was made from water, a couple of carrots, or any other vegetable that was left rotten and, at most, a piece of meat or a bone if one were to be lucky. It was thin, hardly spiced, and was stretched to go around the whole family. You can consider it as the soup where the idea is more important than the substance. The beauty of rag soup was that it was a very versatile dish. Got a carrot and a potato? In they go. Found a pinch of salt? Jackpot. It was a meal that was prepared in a time of famine and at the same time creativity. And though it was simple, it gave heat and food during the worst conditions. Rag soup is evidence of the fact that Dust Bowl families were able to survive and cook something tasty even out of the scraps. Carrot tops, the lost greens that were anything but lost during the Dust Bowl. When fresh vegetables were out of season, nothing was thrown away, not even the green tops of carrots. Carrot top salad made these usually discarded greens into a rather healthy meal. The greens were chopped, dressed with vinegar or lemon juice, and combined with any leftovers of vegetables or wild greens that could be found. If you were really fancy, you might add some more olive oil or a dash of salt. The result? A sharp, sour dish that was anything but luxurious, but was instead a nutritionist's dream. Carrot tops have a robust, somewhat pungent taste, so they are considered a luxury item in today's terms. However, as they say, when the going gets tough, the tough get eating, and Dust Bowl families were certainly tough. Fun fact, carrot tops are not only edible, but also rich in nutrients such as vitamin K and other vitamins and minerals. I'd like to try this salad, perhaps, if there is enough dressing to offset the bitterness. It is not something I would run for, but I do appreciate the creativity of using leftovers to get food. If there is one thing that the Dust Bowl did, it showed that although survival may not always be pretty, it is always impressive. Dandelion coffee was one of the many substitutes that appeared when coffee beans were either unavailable or unaffordable. Families would dig up dandelion roots, roast them carefully until dark, and grind them into a coarse powder. When brewed, the result resembled coffee in both color and aroma, though the flavor carried a bitter earthiness all its own. For those accustomed to real coffee, it was not quite the same, but it became a daily ritual that provided both warmth and comfort in lean times. Children and adults alike drank it, often with a little sugar or milk if available to soften the bitterness. Because dandelions were free and abundant, the drink spread widely in both rural and urban areas. It symbolized the Depression's spirit of using whatever nature offered, even weeds, to replace expensive imports. For many families, dandelion coffee was not just a beverage, but a reminder that comfort could still be found in the simplest, most overlooked places. Split pea soup was always something that we enjoyed greatly, mostly thanks to our European neighbors in the States. They didn't become a nationwide sensation until the Depression and World War II hit, though. That entire period actually saw an insane spike in the general perception of beans, peas, and lentils. Basically, anything that was vaguely similar to that was suddenly God's greatest gift to Earth. this doesn't just have to do with the times being hard and there being a massive war going on either. It has to do, again, with some age-old state-backed peer pressure. A lot of people were lost in the face of rations and surpluses that just didn't make the cut or last very long. The tensions with the government were extraordinarily high, especially with a lot of people just being tired of the war effort. The government of the United States of America decided to encourage people to cultivate some new hobbies in these trying times. One of those happens to be foraging, and it was just as convenient as it sounds. Free food that you can gather right from nature itself, that no one has to pay for? You can definitely see why something like that went mainstream. Carrot marmalade came to the rescue when gelatin and popcorn weren't doing much for the taste buds. Now, marmalade usually involves citrus fruits, but during the Dust Bowl, folks had to get creative. This was a pairing that ensured nothing went to waste in the kitchen, including carrots that had slightly gone bad. This wasn't just a treat, but it was a way to preserve the sweetness in fresh fruits and vegetables because fresh produce was hard to come by. This marmalade was made by boiling carrots with sugar and a bit of lemon juice, creating a spread that could be used on bread or biscuits. Plus, carrots are packed with nutrition. Carrots are packed with antioxidants like beta-carotene and lutein. These compounds have protective effects against oxidative stress and inflammation. So most oatmeal meatloaf recipes use the oats as a side piece to, like, 2 pounds of lean ground beef, but that was obviously not what people were working with back then. Instead, the loaf was made entirely of layers of oatmeal, with sausages and bacon stuffed into it to give that meaty profile. Some dried onions and garlic meant that there was good enough reason to get the fine plates out, and there was always enough to go around too. Plus, grandmas really ran with the recipe right after the Depression ended and things started going back to normal. They would add things like tomato sauces and never spare the eggs or the flour. Probably why kids would love it so much since they went all out with it. But after going through a patch where this was a luxury, you cannot blame them for wanting to go the extra mile either. Yes, you heard it here first, skunk stew. Even when the Dust Bowl left dinner plates empty, people were not the only ones who could not escape being eaten. Not even skunks. Now, before you start gagging, let me explain. Skunks were not the preferred source of protein, but when the resources were scarce, the farmers made do with whatever they could hunt down. Cooking skunk stew was not for the faint-hearted. First, you had to, de-skunk the skunk. It was mandatory to have the scent glands removed unless one wanted the house cleared faster than a tornado. After washing, it was cooked with what vegetables and spices were available. The result? A rather soft and gamey meal that was palatable though, but not one that would make me eagerly look forward to the next meal. Skunks may sound like the butt of some jokes, but these animals were a good source of protein food when all else was scarce. And can you imagine? A skunk was not as smelly as other wild games like raccoon or possum. Talk about a backhanded compliment. While skunk stew appears to be the epitome of the challenge-accepted food that is popular today for the survivors of the Dust Bowl, it was a symbol of survival. They made desperation into dinner. As they say, where there is life, there is a chance to live, and sometimes to live, you have to eat the wild, literally. The cheese and pickle sandwich was for the kids who liked things sharp and sour, a little strange, and completely satisfying. A thick slice of cheddar, sometimes aged, layered with sweet pickles or tangy dill slices pressed between slices of sandwich bread, often white, occasionally wheat. It was a flavor bomb. Salty cheese met vinegary crunch, and somehow the combination made more sense than you would think. This was not a loud sandwich. It did not leak or crumble or stain your lunch bag. It sat there quietly, confident in its simplicity. You either craved it or could not stand it. But for those who loved it, it was perfect. It was the kind of sandwich you could eat cold, no heating or fuss required. It stayed intact. It delivered every time. Over the years, cheese and pickle became more of a British delicacy than an American staple. But there was a time when this sandwich showed up in lunchboxes across the country. Today, it is rarely seen in school cafeterias. The peanut butter and banana sandwich was sticky, sweet, and oddly sacred, especially if you grew up with a radio playing Elvis in the background. Soft white bread cradled ripe banana slices layered atop thick peanut butter creating a sandwich that was pure indulgence and pure nostalgia all at once. It was comfort food at its simplest. No baking, no slicing, just a knife, a spoon, and one slightly bruised banana. Kids loved it. Parents trusted it. Lunchboxes welcomed it. Every bite was creamy, soft, and just a little bit messy. Sometimes it got mashed during the morning bus ride, but that only made it better. Denser, more unified, like the ingredients had been given time to fall in love. Elvis Presley may have added bacon to his, but most kids were happy with just the basics. Over the years, the peanut butter and banana sandwich faded from lunch menus, traded out for wraps and granola bars. But it never really disappeared. Carrot marmalade was a sweet spread that helped families feel like they had something luxurious for breakfast, even in the toughest years of the Depression. Sugar was precious, but when it could be managed, grated carrots simmered down with citrus peel made a bright orange jam that tasted far richer than its ingredients suggested. Citrus itself was not always available, so many recipes leaned heavily on the carrots, using peel or extract when possible. The finished marmalade was thick, fragrant, and easily spread across homemade bread or crackers, turning simple staples into something that felt festive. Children loved its sweetness, and parents appreciated how it stretched a handful of carrots into enough jam to last for several mornings. Many community cookbooks published carrot marmalade recipes, encouraging families to rely on what they could grow in gardens. It was a dish that turned scarcity into creativity, and for many households it became a small comfort that brightened otherwise plain and repetitive meals. You'll see a lot of main ingredients being replaced with affordable and convenient substitutes here. It was just how you did things back then. People weren't exactly living the picture of fine dining back then. Scalloped potatoes and chopped picnic casseroles were recipes that really stuck true to that entire concept. So scalloped potatoes have been a favorite all over the States, and that only became more true during the war, but what about those casseroles? Well, normally this is just what you would call a leftover casserole. That's literally what it was, since a lot of people just used the recipe as a way to get rid of leftovers, which is also why it didn't see a lot of use back when things were okay. Skip to the 40s though, and you'll see nothing but praise for this dish. The concept here is a dish that's ready to eat right out of the fridge. Stale bread, crackers, canned meats like Spam, bits of sausages, and anything that could count as leftovers worked. Sometimes neither the scalloped potatoes nor the casserole was substantial enough on its own to fill a family. Put 2 and 2 together, and you have the closest thing to a picnic that you could get back then. Speaking of food combinations, this next one will definitely blow your mind. Have you ever thought of combining beef with gelatin? If not, this is your sign to twist things up a bit and try this one out. There's a reason why this one was the talk of the town during the dirty 30s. The gelatin was used to thicken soups and stews, while the beef added a hint of protein. Now, since the supply was always limited, don't expect a whole beef steak in your bowl. Just a few chopped up bits and pieces of meat and every few bites was all you got. This meal was designed to be full, and it was left bland for the most part. However, some people in the South decided to spice things up a bit by remixing the recipe according to their likes. One such recipe included canned corned beef, canned peas, gelatin, lemon juice, and vinegar. We wouldn't consider pairing these ingredients today, but it was a lifesaver for those who had to make it through the hard times. Cornmeal mush is usually made with water or milk and is a type of pudding or porridge depending on the needs of the meal. This became incredibly widespread in the southeastern and eastern bits of America, and it makes sense given how much wartime rations were consumed there. When the government would hand those out, they would often make a point to lower sugar usage and use molasses to conserve other ingredients, so people would pair cornmeal mush along with them. Mush is a more accurate term since it does kind of land somewhere in the middle ground between a pudding and a porridge. It has the consistency of the latter, but it gels and sets like the former, which gives it a slightly airy texture too. Did you know it would not be cooked in milk though? That was set after the mush was prepared to cool it down. If you believe that eating insects is a modern sustainable practice, you are wrong. In the Dust Bowl, crispy fried grasshoppers were not a joke, they were a staple food. During the poor harvests, and when meat was hard to come by, farmers looked to the hordes of grasshoppers feeding on the crops. Talk about revenge dining. Hunting grasshoppers was a family event, and when you had gathered enough grasshoppers in a bucket, then the cooking process started. They were washed, marinated, and then fried to a crisp golden brown. The result? A crunchy snack that contained protein and was not too shabby if one didn't consider what they were consuming. Grasshoppers are in fact a form of superfood as they contain high protein, iron, and good fats. The Dust Bowl families were not consciously trying to innovate, but they were able to feed themselves in a way that many others could not. Also, if you fry anything, it automatically becomes at least 50% tastier, doesn't it? Nowadays, insects are being considered as a source of food, but in the past, crispy grasshoppers were a means of feeding oneself. Peanut butter and pickle sandwiches were the lunchbox legends nobody admits to loving, but many still secretly miss. Born out of the Great Depression, this odd pairing was less about culinary boldness and more about making do with what was left in the pantry. Peanut butter was cheap, packed with protein, and shelf-stable. Pickles added crunch, tang, and just enough bite to wake up plain white bread. Somehow, the combination worked. The sweet creaminess of the peanut butter and the sharp, vinegary snap of a dill or bread and butter pickle created a balance that stayed with you, whether you liked it or not. These sandwiches were slipped into wax paper and handed off like rationed gold. Some kids traded them. Others guarded them with their lives. They were cheap, they were weird, and they were unforgettable. As the decades rolled on and lunch menus got glossier, peanut butter and pickle sandwiches faded from view. It might not win a gourmet prize today, but back then, it was a masterpiece made from struggle and stubbornness. Cabbage coleslaw proved that absolutely nothing went to waste in the Depression era. While most people today throw away the tough core of a cabbage, thrifty families of the 1930s shaved it finely to make a crunchy salad. With vinegar, a little sugar, and maybe a pinch of salt, it transformed into something tangy and surprisingly refreshing. Carrots or onions, if available, might be added for color and flavor, but often it was just the cabbage core itself. It became a side dish for meals that otherwise would have been too plain or heavy, adding brightness without any real cost. This slaw was a simple reminder that waste was not an option, and even what many considered garbage could become a dish worth serving. Families learned to enjoy the sharp taste and crunchy bite, and for some it even became a regular part of the dinner table. Scrambled eggs had a massive makeover during the World War. It was a lot more common to add chopped parsley and chives to them rather than bacon and hash browns. Rationing efforts meant that a lot of basic ingredients were amiss, not just meat. While people were fighting over scraps of bacon, the sudden egg shortage really took them by surprise. Eggs were a pretty common breakfast, which I think is true of anywhere in the world. They were also a wonderful source of protein, so I'm sure you can figure out why the government wanted all the eggs to themselves. Dried, powdered eggs supplemented with water were used instead. You'd use the water and whisk them until they'd reach something that still resembled the texture of a fresh egg. Then, if you could afford to, you'd use some powdered milk to further make it resemble your typical plate of scrambled eggs. That raised another concern, which was, well, the powdered eggs are running out too fast. The solution people came up with at that point was to use fillers like vegetables, the parsley and chives, to fatten the egg up a bit. Make it a bit more substantial, you know? I have to say, I think they did a pretty clean job with it. In about 25 minutes, you had yourself a quality and healthy meal that kept your energy going for all the labor of the week. This recipe really made a name for itself during the mid-1930s to 40s when people were facing a dire shortage of eggs. Still, if you did not have even some potatoes on hand but still wanted a pancake to cheer your kids up, you would go for eggless pancakes. Some shortening, sugar, milk, and salt were all you needed to make this version of the beloved American dish, plus just some water to bind if you could not find any milk to spare. Lucky were the homes that had lard, as that really made for some fluffy and thick cakes, but complaining was not really something people did during those times. A simple recipe like this let them revisit the taste of pancakes from back when they had fully stocked fridges, after all. Pickling was a common practice during the Dust Bowl, and when you're not sure whether you'll wake up to a fresh harvest of fruits, preserving them is the way to go. And what's a better way of preserving fruits than pickling them? I mean, you could dehydrate nature's sweets, but picking is a whole lot tastier. Pickling involves soaking fruits in a mixture of vinegar, salt, and spices. Fruits like apples, peaches, and even cherries were pickled with sugar and vinegar to create a sweet and tangy treat that could last throughout the year. These pickled fruits were often enjoyed as a side dish or used to add a bit of sweetness to other meals. It's crazy to think that pickled fruits were one of the only sweet treats available during the Dust Bowl era. Don't underestimate the versatility of cotton. It is not only used to produce clothes. When the Dust Bowl hit, farmers learned that they could take cottonseed, no joke, it's a byproduct of cotton cultivation, and make a loaf of something that could be eaten. Cottonseed loaf was the ultimate frugal meal, the idea of turning what was essentially waste into the main course. Cottonseed was poisonous and had to be cooked to remove the poison. Then it was ground and then added to flour, water, and whatever spices and leftovers people had. It's sort of like a meatloaf's distant relative, only there is no meat and, well, there's not a whole lot of taste. The loaf was heavy, tough, and by no means delicious, but it was quite healthy to sustain the people. The idea was not entirely radical. Cottonseed is very high in protein, and since it was already being fed to animals, it was only a short jump to try it out on humans. Spoiler alert, they could, but at the cost of a little pain. When the options are between cottonseed loaf and nothing, then the cottonseed loaf does not look too bad at all. Moreover, it is a good lesson on how people have to exist with what they have, even if what they have is cotton. Peanut butter and marshmallow sandwiches were sticky, chewy, and completely chaotic in the best way. Unlike the Fluffernutter, which used smooth marshmallow creme, this version went old school, layering whole marshmallows right onto the peanut butter. The result was messier, thicker, and somehow more exciting. As you bit down, the marshmallows gave a stretch, and the peanut butter clung to everything: your teeth, the roof of your mouth, your fingers. It was the kind of sandwich that slowed you down, made you chew carefully, and left sweet residue in the corners of your smile. Some kids toasted it, watching the marshmallows melt into gooey bliss. Others just packed it cold and let the sandwich warm up on its own in their backpack by noon. Either way, it was dessert disguised as lunch, and it was glorious. You rarely saw it outside of grade school, but back then, it was a lunchbox secret weapon. No meat, no greens, no apologies, just joy between two slices of bread. Mock banana pudding was the sort of dish that showed just how inventive Depression-era cooks could be when real ingredients were simply out of reach. Bananas, once imported luxuries, quickly became too expensive for families to buy. To make up for it, people leaned on banana extract, which could be purchased cheaply and used sparingly to add flavor, layered with homemade custard, when eggs and milk could be spared, and stacked between vanilla wafers or leftover bits of stale cake. The pudding felt surprisingly close to the original. Families would chill it in an icebox if they had one, though often it was served warm right from the stove. For children, it was a rare treat that offered the illusion of a fruit dessert, even if no fresh fruit was present. In many homes, mock banana pudding became a stand-in for celebration desserts, stretching scarce supplies into something families could still enjoy together, and for many, it carried the sweetness of hope itself. So you might be surprised to hear Party Franks on this list. Just because the times were as tough as they were doesn't mean people forgot how to have fun. Party Franks today are pretty much just an appetizer at family gatherings and potlucks, but back then, it was totally different. There was this entire concept of community-based cooking that was pretty much exclusive to that time period. Neighborhoods would pool their resources and pantries together. They'd cook up a storm for the whole block, and it would leave everyone fulfilled and satisfied. The idea was that people would get more variety, nutrition, and overall food if everyone shared an agreed amount from the get-go. Party Franks were perfect for situations like this because it was extremely easy to prepare for an entire group of people. When I say group, I mean at least a dozen plus, not a family of 4. You'd have pigs in a blanket with sausages wrapped in leftover dough, or you'd have them sliced into tiny bits and added to stews, soups, and sometimes even sandwiches. It was a little way to add some flavor and style to